You're listening to the Miles Ahead podcast with Dr. Miles Graham Salisbury, where he shares tactics, techniques, and protocols to improve your physical, spiritual, and mental fitness in order to become self-led, grounded, and integrated.
Welcome back to the Miles Ahead podcast. My guest today is Marlin Bernabe, who's a certified personal trainer and calls himself a cheerleader, and he'll get into why that is. He trains people at a bunch of different locations, some disclosed, undisclosed, some are disclosed, like Project 360, the gym I work out, which is co-owned by my dad and run by Adam Barron, who will hopefully be on the podcast at some point. He's in the house. Finally got him in the room. We will let him introduce himself. Maybe we want to start with the origin story, or where do you want to start? Where do you want to start with? Or do you want to talk about?
Well, first off, I'd like to first recognize Adam Barron.
Good call.
Yeah.
Good call.
So thank you, Adam, for building and putting together Project 360. For those who don't know, downtown Lake Oswego, beautiful 9,000 square feet facility. For me, I found, or Project 360 found me somewhere on the front end of the pandemic, I think Q3 of 2021, of which I had been at Club Sport and Bay Club for 18 years. And as many of us, displaced March 16th, 2020. So I then became 100% mobile guy. And a year and a half had gone by before I was able to find somewhere to kind of reconstruct some form of routine, and I found then Project 360. So Adam's built a beautiful space. He's got a handful of true pros over there.
Absolutely.
Who really elevate their level of service and their care for their clients and community. So thank you, Adam.
Is that when you branded yourself as Move That Body? How did you have that brand?
If anybody knows a gentleman named Ben Billups with Billups Worldwide, he is now in Serbia and splits time between Barcelona and Serbia. And he was a young professional, late 20s, and this was about 20 years ago. So doing the math, he's about 48 years old. And he was training with me in between sets. He had a lot of maybe questions for the science behind why we were doing what we were doing, so much that he wasn't actually even doing anything. And so I said, Ben Billups, you just need to move that body.
Uh-huh.
And so all these years later, looking back, that is the inception of the brand Move That Body.
You've got a great logo, by the way, too.
Oh, thank you.
It looks almost like a 13 sometimes, but it's also a B.
Yeah, so the B stands for the body in Move That Body. And
Or Bernabe.
Or Bernabe. And the brand B is also BE. So if grammatically, if we were to go BE : it would be that which follows as to what we're representing. So be strong, be present.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. And so brand B and Move That Body, the B is also for blessed, 13 for those believers.
There we go. Love it. Layers, multiple layers. Very good. Yeah, your social media posts are always really good. You've got good branding and cool t-shirts and swag. We'll
Thank you.
it.
Yeah, one of the things I think I'm known for is like brand consistency, like an artist, self-identified artist, and so there's a lot of repeated elements and consistency, a lot of clean lines in the branding. And those who know me will know that like the brand franchise colors are red, white, and blue. So you'll see that very consistently throughout all of the work as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you pop.
Hey.
You can always tell when it's your stuff. So origin story. You don't have to spend too much time, but are you from Oregon or are you from a different state? What's the...
Native Oregonian, born in Eastern Oregon, a little town called Pilot Rock.
No way.
Yeah, a little town called Pilot Rock. Population 1,500.
Wow.
Yeah, so graduating class of 17, 3.19 GPA. So I think that was
That's about mine
top
was.
of class. But I only reference that as to we're always chasing, and it's interesting how all these years later, tracing back some of our work to that which we maybe learned or how we were brought up. And in my case, very blue collar, hardworking farm and timber industry.
Mm-hmm. Is that informed somewhere along the way to what you're doing now?
I think so. I was introduced to athletics. I didn't do organized athletics until 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball, Little League baseball, and then quickly into junior high, American Legion baseball, and then was always around either the weight room or playing fields or courts. Moving into college, I thought I was going to be maybe an art major and then do something in exercise science, PE, health. And everywhere I went, I would always find myself in and around a weight room or on playing fields. So that's always been a staple.
Mm-hmm. And you've integrated those two now, which is very cool. And so time moves on and you start getting into strength and conditioning or certified personal training. I mean, there's so many different terms. I don't know. All you guys have a different letters behind your name, and I never really know what it means.
Yeah.
There's so many, I know there are different credentials you can get. So at some point you took that up, and before we were talking, you mentioned something about wanting to make people feel stronger within themselves as well. There's a little backstory there.
Yeah, a little backstory. I think that particularly as young men, always wanting to be maybe bigger, faster, stronger, more handsome. We were talking offline a little bit about maybe where the brand identity came from. And I certainly know that I was telling Miles a little bit about being a young 13-year-old boy and having a girlfriend at that time. And I remember this moment referencing an upperclassman, also athlete, whom she had a certain affinity for. And some of the comments left me feeling a little bit less than.
Classic story. Yeah.
Classic story. And so for me, I remember doing a brand identity exercise somewhere around the Club Sport Bay Club days and identifying that to be a pivotal moment where I also wanted to be able to be he or she who could create platforms and programs for others to realize successes on our wins on their own terms. And so as I look back at my work with training, I feel like I have an opportunity to do that every day where they show up and they can smash or not smash the weights, go at their own pace, create their own experience, but really realize those wins on their own terms. At the end of the session, they get to go take their superpowers and go on their way. And I've done my job. Yeah,
you do a good job integrating that. When I'm watching you work with, especially the group classes, you're always watching them and you get your little filmed feedback, and you have them on like sort of circuit training, which is kind of cool. And then you do individual training too, and I see you doing some coaching. But I don't know if it's different at different gyms, but you seem to do a really good job with what we say in football or soccer, the wives and girlfriends club. It's like the women's groups, you have definitely done a marvelous job. Like one will come in and just be finishing, and another group will come in and you'll run through all these cool circuit trainings. And sometimes their husbands will come in and dip in there too. It's really cool. And a lot of mobility work with strength, maybe touching on some HIIT training a little bit. It's just different than what I've seen, than
Thank you.
typical personal training, so you've got some stuff I've never seen before, but looks like a great workout.
Thank you.
And you got your own, all your branded stuff out there too. It's really cool. Things on wheels and like pads, and it's just like really cool.
Yeah, I think that's something we all get this one unique body, right? One long life of excellence. And so when training, it feels like training he or she who's in front of me, right? Even though you might have, Gunnar Peterson talks about this, like a program is a template, not a Bible. And so if you approach your work as a trainer in that way, then you can uniquely show up on that given day and that time and simply train that person who is in front of you. No, say, cookie cutter, not one program works for everybody.
That makes sense.
And therefore understanding the relationship piece with, in this case, husbands and wives, right? If you can show up respectfully and respectively for he who needs maybe more mobility, wants more strength training, and at the same time, simultaneously execute a program that is appropriate for her, then I think that we've added value on both fronts.
I agree. You can see it. That leads to my next question. How do you get, we have a lot of men listeners on the podcast and a fair few women. First, how do you get men to get interested / motivated or curious about moving their body, getting strength, whatever they need? Like some have never been to the gym, some have like lapsed and it's hard to get them back in. I'm sure you've seen it all. What helps to get them back?
There's this thing that I used to do, and it was a bit playful, a little bit tongue in cheek, but I would literally grab either the guy's hand or the lady's hand, and I'd point on the floor at a line, imaginary line, that this part is the weight room and this part is, say, cardio or something else. And you and I are gonna walk in here and tackle this together. So there's some kind of reservation about maybe breaching that initial reservation. So I think that not only once we're going, here's another Gunnar Peterson quote. It's talking about like when we are 100% away from a goal, right? Anything can help. And so whether that is walking 15 minutes per day, 3 days a week, that might be plenty to start with. They think that maybe they need to stop smoking and stop drinking and go vegan and do 45 minutes of cardio 5 days a week, all in week one. But there again is just getting started and being consistent with one thing before taking on a whole bunch of things is key. And I think that that's consistent with men or women. To speak to also something that does happen is that it's once we have some momentum, then I think we're a little bit more in the clear. Once we lose that momentum, or we start to take a string of days off or give ourselves permission and we rationalize and take ourselves out of that sort of groove, that's where we run into a little bit of the challenge to restart. So maybe part of the cheerleading concept is not only in the moment saying, hey, great job, or work on these particular areas of focus in your technique, but rather like continuing to get them there 2 more times that week, and or checking on them 6 weeks down the line. Are they still doing the thing that they said that they were going to do, right? Miles, you and I talked about this. It's the mundane, right? We spend the majority of our life in the process, and very few of the actual data points are in the results or the product. And so if you're looking at a triangle or a pyramid, right, the masses are in the mundane, right? I feel like if we can somehow sell this idea the movement in moderation, right? It's not always a sprint,
Right.
and it's not for just today or next week, but we have this long life of excellence that we need to focus in on the daily tasks.
Mm-hmm. And for I'm sure a lot of men listening and vice versa have spouses like their values align with like, okay, I want to be healthy and have a fit body, but their significant others are maybe not interested or haven't got there yet. Is there a way to advice to those men or women to help their significant others get curious or get into the gym with them or training with you or something like that? I don't know how that works.
I'm not just super well versed nor well read in regards to like studies say this, that, or the other. I think I have enough moments of empirical knowledge to speak to the fact that the trick is, and I'll use your name here, Miles, is that there's an example of it being proverbial. It is never a good idea until it becomes Dr. Miles Salisbury's great idea, right? I could tell you, and I could tell you, and I could tell you, but only when it becomes your great idea do we actually see the needle move a little bit. So I think that there's an element of grace and support if you're talking about relationship inside of a home that says, hey, I would really love for you to join me at the gym, or if you have a small group men's workout 2 days a week that you could join, I would really love for you to check that out. That's a hard sell until it becomes his great idea. And I don't really know any other way around that other than just maybe leaning in with love and support and saying, hey, I would love this for you. And then modeling on the front end, like, I'm going to do this for me, ellipse, for us. And then he or she, as the other part of that relationship, can either then on their own terms, in their own time, decide that also is for them or it is not. So I don't really know any other way around that other than just first modeling and effectively communicating that you would love for this to be the case. But I like to say that in the terms of like, it's never a good idea until it becomes this other person's great idea.
Yeah, it's spot on. You can't force someone to do it, but you can invite them and say, oh, it's important for the relationship. So I'm assuming at that point, you don't have to do that work, but they're coming in as like Padawans, like, and then you get them, like their wife has quote unquote convinced them or sold them on the idea.
I think that we also, and I wanted to speak to this a little bit too, is that, and I know for me personally, Miles, is that like, I know that I'm better to show up in relationships and better equipped to take on challenges and life if I first take care of myself. And I think that we see this, there's evidence in that when somebody gets on to something that is good for them and they bring it home either in their expression or their energy or their conversation. And then just out of sheer curiosity, that maybe spouse will lean in and need to know more about it, either from the horse's mouth or they'll go figure it out and find it for themselves. So I do think that once we can create an environment where people can realize those wins, and then they can't help but wear their testimony on their sleeve. They take that out into their other relationships and how they show up in the world. And I think that speaks greater than any PR, rep could.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, taking care of yourself does translate into other slices of your life. And when you're working with men and women, I don't know if there's a big difference. You'd mentioned it's kind of case by case basis on what they're looking to do in their body, strength versus cardio. How often is there like a general rule of thumb, or is that really kind of tailored to the person? What type of workouts, things like that?
Sometimes people, they don't know. They don't know, right? They don't know what they're asking for, and sometimes they think they know, and so they in their mind describe something that is not even the direction in which we're going, right? And so I think that having clear cut goals and saying, hey, I definitively want to be this number on the scale. I want to be able to see my six pack. I want
Right.
to be able to jump this high or run this far, this fast. There's an element of the exact metrics that we're trying to deliver on. But for truthfully, Miles, with my programming and this Move That Body brand and movement and moderation, not that we need to compare ourselves relative to somebody else, but at the same time, who is working out? If you lined up 15 of your friends and asked them, who of you are working out 4 days a week, consistently for the last 10 years, consistently being 30 minutes, independent of the intensity and or the modality. But I think we would be hard pressed in this day and age to find a majority that says, "Hey, I'm that guy or I'm that girl," right? And so again, if we're 100% away from the goal, then anything is going to get us closer to that. And once we've nailed that down, then let's start to add more to it. So I think, again, working off of the masses, not that it's neither irresponsible or unprofessional, but I just think that we need to look at the lesser of the elite and say, like, what do we as basic human beings need? And I think that many of us just need a regular dose of movement consistently for a long time for the rest of our life. Is kind of how that shakes out.
I agree.
It sounds like it's a real safe answer, but at the same time, it supports the fact that life is not a sprint, and it's not in this very moment, and leaning back into the nailing down the less sexy mundane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it for sure helps for longevity and health span and staying healthy and keeping it habitual. So it sounds like what gets measured gets done for what you do. Someone comes in, they have no idea, and you help them flesh out what they're maybe looking for, what they didn't know they should be looking for, and then you tweak it from there. And then you just get them coming in as a habit, and then you can fine tune there at some point.
There's this interesting thing, I guess I'll touch on this, that like we are social beings, like we are social animals. And so that has certainly, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that has been my wheelhouse. Offline, I'm probably very much an introvert, but when put in front of people, I understand that we want to be seen. We have this desire to be seen. And so like we show up, and we're either accepted and or invited into a social setting, whether it's a small group, one on two, or if it's one-on-one with your trainer. Like there's something to be said about the sheer social nature of what it is that we do. And yes, it's in my space, it's called personal training. But there's something just to be said about the fact that we desire to be social.
Yeah, that's huge. I noticed, like, I think it was during COVID, and then when I blew my Achilles out, I had to work out at home, and it just was sort of depressing, And then when I come back to the gym, you have all these people, the social contacts. My psychological health, mental fitness just went way back up. I felt happier and a little more joyful. There's a extra component you get from going to a gym, getting out of your environment where you have all the cues of things that stress you out or depress you in your home, maybe getting a little sunlight on the way, and then making those social contacts really helpful. I think that's why personal training is helpful for a lot of people, because at least you get someone working out with you, or if you go with a buddy, or just all the people at the gym. And that's what's cool about our gym, is it's a little more tight-knit. Everyone really, they know each other a little bit more than just like, oh, that's Bob or whatever, they know more about Bob. Whereas if like 24-hour fitness, everybody has their headphones and you might recognize people, but no one's talking to each other really, unless they're doing some sort of class together. This gym is different because people are always talking to each other, making connections, hanging out, doing cool stuff, networking. I find that really helpful. So that's a good point. I think that's why personal training can be really helpful for people that are first starting or have no idea about the gym. They go in and they don't know what to do, and they don't want to look stupid or whatever. Well, if you have a personal trainer, that you don't have to worry about any of that, and that person will show up, and it's accountability as well. So there's like a kind of a slam dunk in there, which I think is really helpful.
There's this thing about personal trainers, and maybe it's a misunderstanding or that like somehow magically personal trainers have this, it all figured out. Figured out. Right? In the truth.
How you got your certification in figuring it out.
The truth is that we're all just trying to figure it out, right? We know, I like to say, like, I know some things. I don't know everything. And that's across the board, right? But this idea that it's a cooperative learning experience, that it's a relationship, but with that, there's some give and take, right? You can always override what I say. Sure, you're the customer, air quotes customer, but at the same time, I don't have any power over you. I have some level of guidance, but I love this idea that we can collaborate and it's a cooperative learning experience, I like to say.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys have also the layer of not just the type of moves you're doing, but I'm sure they're talking about their personal lives. There's a coaching element for you for like, help the cheerleader part, helping people get through what they're doing, but also like we were talking before about how like bartenders, massage therapists, hair salon people, there's just that chit chat about their personal lives that comes in on top of it. And you guys probably get a lot of that. And how do you navigate that? And like, are we friends? Are we not friends? And like, is it just a personal relationship, or do I trust this person enough to go further, or do I need to have more boundaries around this person? I wish you guys would get more of that training in your training, because for those other professions I mentioned too, I hope that they get that as well, because some people might not be ready for that as trainers, but it's going to come your way for sure. And when people exert physically, same with body workers, a lot of trauma can come up for people unexpectedly, emotions, resistance to what you're training them to do, fear, blah blah blah, or their personal stories, or they haven't, like a lot of guys, they don't have their male friends, and they like, dude, there's this one guy and he's my trainer, and so you're gonna get the dump of all the stuff that's going on, which is good for that guy. He needs more male connections, but I'm sure you've felt some of this coming your way before. Have you navigated that?
That's an interesting thing. I want to think that we have some sort of proclivity to for some reason we are entrusted, with this information, right? But I can't also convince myself that we're unique in that way. I kind of think that they're looking. That's maybe they're looking for somewhere. That connection, sure. And if it's not me, it might be the guy or girl who cuts their hair. It might be the person who gives them the monthly massage. I am thankful that we do, in a sense, we are trusted with this space and this information, and that people will hope that we would share that, hold space for them. But I think you're right. How does one navigate? That's a tricky space, because it is personal training, and we do commonly spend an hour per session, one-on-one, one-on-two, small group, of somewhat time that's just theirs, right? And I don't know where else they are prioritizing time for just them, exactly. Where they take their money out of their pocket and they hand it to somebody else and I like to recognize this in the economies of scale of time, energy, and money, right? If they want to spend their time with somebody, that's something that they'll never get back, right? So there's high value to that energy. You're going to ask me to do what, Marlin? And so lesser on the economy scale is energy, and then lastly is sort of money. So time, energy, and money in that order. But heavily is it weighted that they spend that hour with you, and that is somewhat undivided attention, where they might not have kids in the car yelling at them, pulling at them and saying, hey, I need this, I want that, or a spouse who might need or want something, and or a job that's pulling at them. Hopefully they can come in and they get what they're paying for, what they're investing time and good money and energy into. And I think that there's this idea that somewhere we can blur the lines a little bit, and that always and that often presents itself.
Yeah, the line blurring. And it's sort of easy in my field because we have clear ethical boundaries we adhere to within psychotherapy, and we get training in it. I just kind of wish you guys had some of that sometimes. I don't know. You guys are allowed to hang out if you want to. We're not. So it's called a dual relationship. We can't do it. Maybe in the coaching sphere for some people, there's an element to that, but for psychotherapy, absolutely not. It just keeps things more clean. As much as sometimes we're pulled to it, like, oh, I could really be friends with this guy. It's about them, not me. Like it's their time. They don't need to learn about me and my stuff. In the gym, it could be totally different, and actually might be helpful to make that sort of, even if it's a pseudo connection with another person, when they're working out, to be able to talk about their personal stuff with you, and you can give some things back, and just have a healthy connection can be great. But I know it's a lot of pressure on you guys on the other end as well.
There's this funny dichotomy that happens. I do think that when somebody exposes themselves from the authoritative position, a trainer, and they say, oh, this reminds me of that time when something similar happened to me, right? And all of a sudden you're relatable.
Yes.
And then the conversation goes in two different directions instead of a one-way conversation. And so it's a little different than as you described in your field. Whereas I think that it can be abused, but it's also certainly it can segue into
all kinds of different directions.
Yeah.
For us, we can self-disclose as long as it is helping the patients. Like, they're going through a hard time, you can say, oh, yeah, I went through the exact same thing, and here's how it landed for me. And if that helps the therapeutic rapport and it helps them move forward, it's fine. As long as it doesn't stay on you, it's totally fine. But it's a thing we have to. It's the kind of art of psychotherapy to know that. But I could see that being maybe a challenge for you guys. Let's have my list to ask you here. About future goals or ambitions for your brand. I know you're always thinking that way. On the horizon.
It's like I've always been, and for a long time I was kind of known to be this collaboration guy. I just was. I have a couple of female friends who are of the collaboration queen. When I think about who's helping whom and where, I think of these particular people. And for a long time, I then was butting up against like whether or not I have bandwidth to be involved in other things. And so I do know this, that I'm always of the growth mindset. I'm just always looking to.
I can tell.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the moment, but I'm definitely forecasting something coming. And I think that that's progressive. It's also, if you're reversing the lens and you're looking at today back, that's always the process. Like we would never be here if we, hadn't done the things that we did to get here. And so I just feel like I'm always, though present, I'm looking to kind of do more, bigger, better, either refine the brand and or offerings, whether it's, I don't know, revenues is not really a driving factor, but impact, I think, maybe the more. I do a count of like heart count versus head count. And so it's like the more impressions you can have and the culmination of heart counts that you impact, I think that that's where one builds like a little bit of, say, legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Seems like you're doing it. This is really cool. Anything else before we land the plane that you wanted to speak about that we didn't get to, or questions you wish I would have asked you? It's okay if you don't.
It was interesting when you, for your audience, this is my first podcast. You may or may not be able to tell in my delivery.
Doing just fine.
But I remember earlier last week talking about this, and you phrased it as, "Are you ready for the interview?"
Is that what it said?
I think so. And I was perplexed that this is an interview.
Yeah, it's a conversation.
Is kind of how it comes across, right? And though it's a conversation, it's my first exposure to podcasts, and in a sense, it a little bit is. It's like, what do you have to offer that's of value to my audience? And hopefully, there was a few things in there, if anything. And with that, for me, not the best interview.
Oh, sure. You did fine for your first one. It's always weird, and when someone asks you these questions, it requires a little self-reflection that I think a lot of us don't really do often. We're just kind of doing our thing, and we have some idea. But when I ask you some of these questions, you have to dig in and kind of go, what is my origin story? What do I like to do? Who am I? And what am I about? And what's my purpose? What's my meaning? A lot of people don't reflect on what's my purpose, what's my meaning, what calls to me, what's my calling in life. And that kind of hits more maybe in your 30s or 40s or 50s, but it's a good question to start asking yourself.
There is this interesting thing, Miles, that I talk about, that sometimes understanding and identifying what we are about is oftentimes recognizing what we are not about, right?
Say more about that.
The saying like, hey, I'm not about that sort of thing. And so as you were talking about like self-reflecting, it's a little bit harder to identify, hey, Marlin, what is it that you do, and why do you get up and go do the thing that you do every day? What gets you out of bed and gets you excited, and what gets you juiced up? And sometimes the backing your way into the answer is saying like what I'm not about, right? And when somebody tells you, oh, this is what I do for work, and you're like, man, that would suck, right? Like, I'm so thankful, I'm so grateful that I get to do something that's not that. And so anyway, the self-reflection thing sometimes is not acutely identifying, in this case, all of the great and all of the good, but rather just knowing that, holy moly, there are a whole lot of people out there who are doing a whole shit ton of stuff that's way worse.
Yeah,
it's a backwards way of saying like that I'm really grateful and thankful to be doing and having the opportunities to do what I do every day. There's the antithesis to that is that there are a whole bunch of people who are doing a whole bunch of stuff that I would definitely not want to at any pay in any economy.
Yeah, for sure. Jobs they hate, or the golden handcuffs scenario. That's the trap too. Yeah, freedom to do what you want to do, sort of following your bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say, what pulls on you, and just kind of going with it for a little bit, even though there's going to be adversity. At least you're doing something that you like within the adversity, and that keeps you going. It's easy to just go plug into the matrix and collect a paycheck and survive. Like we've all been there, sure, and you can stay there, but that's slow death. Like that's a soul suck. So I'm glad you're able to have found something where you can keep iterating on that gives you joy every day, and you can keep expanding I think that's what we're sort of meant to do. Like, what calls us? What's your purpose? What's your meaning? Just kind of ask that question every day. And also, to your point, what doesn't call you? What are you not about? That's a good way, process of elimination. I haven't thought about it that way. Like, what don't I like, or what are not my values? That's a good way to start precluding things. And you might find, shit, I'm in a job where that doesn't hit my values. Maybe I need to dip out and be a little brave and switch over to something else that is calling me. I mean, a lot of people feel the call to do my work or coaching or personal training, and maybe a little afraid. We had a guy in my last podcast he's a classified government position, who couldn't say which one he's in, but he's feeling the call to become a psychotherapist, and he's taking the steps to do that, which is, you're giving up a really stable career that was good for you before and moving into something else that's completely foreign, but it's really calling you from your someplace, saying, I need to follow this thread, pull on this thread, and being brave to do that, even if it's small steps at first. I think that's huge. And you probably did this a long time ago, and you're still doing that, which is awesome.
There's this thing about, and other talking heads, but one of our favorite podcasts is Ed Milet.
Oh yeah, Ed Milet,
right? And he talks about, like, we are best equipped to help the person who we used to be. And that's why recovering alcoholics can better reach and communicate and understand people who battle with that addiction.
They've been there.
Right? People who come from abusive relationships, and or whether they're survivors on the backside, they are better to understand and to relate to those people who are going through that. We're just better equipped to help those who we used to be. And so there's probably, for another podcast, a little bit more to that for Marlin, in that, okay, well, why is it now that I get so juiced up on helping and being available to people in this way? If I dig into that a little bit more, that is a bit of who I most likely is very much in me still, and has always been in me. And so I think I'm digging every day to try to figure out, okay, well, where do I show up best to be that person for that person?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we always joke in our field, we're all wounded healers. Like, nobody wakes up and goes, I want to be a therapist. Like, no sane person goes into our field, like, we went through some shit. So that's what got us curious. Like, oh, that hurt. One, I need to heal myself. Two, I want to help people not hurt like that. I mean, I remember when my parents got divorced, I had some weird thought come to my head. It's like, I don't want any kid to go through this pain like I did. I got to figure out what that job is. And then time went on, and I didn't follow up till I took psychology in high school, and I was like, oh, I remember now. For you, it's probably that 13-year-old boy that was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I want to help people feel empowered, so I don't feel like this ever again. So it's probably a similar wound that enacts our actions. So I want to overcome the wound and help other people overcome their wounds.
There's this interesting thing. It's an anecdotal story, but I'll make it quick, in that, and it has the undertones of literally evidence. It's like clues in plain sight. And the story goes a little bit of this particular gentleman with a mansion and the gate to the entrance. And for 20 years, the hinges, every time it would open up, squeak, squeak, squeak. And this happens to be a real life story that I would train this guy at his house. And on my way out, I took a bottle of can of WD-40 each, and I just hit all of the hinges. I just hit all the hinges, the motor. I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know, but all of a sudden it's quiet. And though it was every 4 minutes for 20 years, the second you'd go, nobody says a thing about it. They don't even notice it, right? And so it's like, similarly to showing up in a training session and being that consistent dose, relentlessly and tirelessly and religiously, that it's like, well, I was under your nose the whole time. I was just there doing the thing. There's like if you look back and if you want to do it transactionally, look at your receipts, save receipts. Like we were both there, we were all there. And these are moments that there's no substitute for other than just being there. But at the same time, it was this dose and repeatedly. And all of a sudden we have a string of 15 years, 3 days a week that there's no substitute for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a weird way to say that, but just the value of sort of sneaking it in where there is value, seeing opportunities and just position yourself where there's opportunity to add value.
We're helping people heal their squeaks, heal their pain. And we didn't know it was there. And I think a lot of us come in with squeaks, and that's how do we get there? How do we heal it? And sometimes we don't notice that we've been squeaking for 20 years and then get that WD-40 out and like, oh shit, it's gone. That feels good. And also it's like, why didn't we see that 20 years ago? But that's a human condition, and it's all good. And you got more years ahead, but that's a very good analogy or metaphor. I always get those two confused of what we do. So
Love that.
Well, that's a good story to bring in. We'll put all the links to your very well done social media, but we can tell people here where's the best place people can find you if they are interested in hitting you up.
The real one platform to find any of my content is Instagram. So at Move That Body 13. So it does have the 13 on the back end. Move That Body 13.
Is that your lucky number? Nice. Love it. If you see the logo, you'll see the layers of what we're talking about. This one's not in video, but you'll see on his page, it's very well designed and very layered for sure.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming in. We'll do a round 2 at some point. Maybe Josh will pop in for one of these and you guys can geek out on personal training. I'll sit back and just watch.
Oh,
Chime in from time to time.
Thanks for having me, Miles.
Of course. It's been good. Are you done for the day or going back?
Finished, yep.
Yeah, good. We can both relax. He was training and I was working out this morning before we hit the podcast, which is always good. Gets the squeak. I get the WD-40 in there. Get the squeak out. All right. If this helped anybody, go please share. And we'll see you all next week.